Hello, and welcome to the Eyes of Ara Dev Diary number 3, the Environment Art Pipeline. This Dev Diary is going to give a brief overview of the step-by-step process that goes into building a room in the Eyes of Ara. Environment art is my specialty. Before I became an indie developer, it's what I did in the industry for the past 10 years now. So it's something I'm very enthusiastic about and very knowledgeable about. So I'm going to try and not get too distracted by the finer details of it and try and focus more on the broader overview of the subject. Naturally also, because it intersects so much with level design, you'll find there's a little bit of overlap between this one and the previous Dev Diary that talked a bit about the room composition, how the art is designed to lead the eye to certain locations. Well, without further ado, let's get started. All environments begin with the level design, and that means good old pen and paper. Despite all the advanced tools we have, that's still the best way to start. I sketch out a lot of ideas for each level, I mark out all the major puzzles, the major secrets, and the general progression through the level. I especially keep a lookout for any part of the layout that gives rise to a particularly unique puzzle opportunity, or anywhere that would be a good fit for a puzzle I've already designed previously. Once I settle on a design I'm happy with, it's time to take it into the game engine. A grey box blockout is exactly what you see here. The play space is blocked out with untextured grey boxes. The purpose here is to get a sense of the space, the shapes, and the general layout of the room. I then use coloured boxes to represent where puzzles or other objects of interest will go. I build the whole level like this, connect up all the teleports between rooms, and find the most interesting places for the main camera in each room to go. At this point, the limitations of 2D paper design start to show themselves, so I also make any changes to the layout here as needed as well. During this step and the next few steps, it's where it's important to set up all the visual composition of the level. I spoke a bit about this in the previous Dev Diary, and I'll mention it again here because it's so important. This is where I figure out where all the major lines are, the framing, the composition, and how it all sort of fits together when the player's looking at it through the game camera. Once I'm happy with the layout of the game in 3D, I start to block out the puzzles. This means either coding them up in full using temporary grey box art, or in some cases just a simplified placeholder version of a puzzle that's implemented just to be able to test the progression through the level. Once these are all in and working and I've set up all the focus cameras, the level is completely playable now from start to finish. There's no hidden secrets at this stage, it's just the main puzzles. But all the main stuff is in there, which means I can now start playtesting it with friends. And based on the feedback from those playtests, I can take another look at it all and make any changes I think are needed. Finally, I start work on the actual art of the level. Working from various sources of inspiration, like concept art and grey box paintovers, I start the art much like the design process, with simplified grey box versions, which are then built into more detailed models and then have their textures and materials applied to them. This process can be quite slow at first when you're building everything from scratch, but as more rooms are built and I can start to reuse bits and pieces, everything becomes a really simple and efficient process. As well as the base structure of the room, most of the major elements are also included, such as the furniture or the major light sources, and from this you start to get a really good idea of what the room's going to look like. With all of the major art elements in place, it's time to once again assess the design of the room. This is an ongoing process, and the layout can change multiple times during development, especially after playtests. Playing the game with art in the scene is vastly different than playing it with the grey box. Things that were once obvious now blend into the scene, and vice versa. Sometimes you want that, and sometimes not. Nevertheless, it's now time to start dressing the scene with smaller details. Things like books and boxes, rubbish, clothing, toys, tools, and so on, and the space starts to feel more lived in. At this point I start replacing any placeholder working lights with actual lighting. The scene is lit for atmosphere, but also to support the level design. Important elements are illuminated, unimportant elements are in shadow, and contrast between the light and dark areas is used to draw the eye towards interesting places. Lighting is a very important part of both the level design and the art pass, so it's important to spend quite a lot of time on this step. With the scene lit, I revisit the art again. I fix up anything that doesn't quite work, shuffle things around a bit, and fill out the dressing a bit more. I then move on to a detail pass, where I add things like cobwebs and cracks and other little decals. All the little details that really go into filling out the scene and making it come alive. I also add things like light rays and halos and particle systems. Although this sort of thing is ongoing, now is a good time to reassess the placement of all the focus cameras. These are the positions the camera will zoom to when you're focusing on something of interest. Now that most of the art is in the game, it's a good time to find the best camera angles for these. Something that works well for the gameplay of the puzzle while creating a visually interesting shot is ideal. Post effects can be really subtle, and yet they can add such an impact to the scene. The Eyes of Ara uses depth of field, bloom, and screen space ambient occlusion, and I have plans to add color grading in there as well in the future. While some of the secrets are planned out in the early stages of the design, some of the best hiding spots are found once the scene is actually complete. At this point I know what the final scene looks like. I can see where the player's eye is being drawn to and where their focus is. So I can start being a bit tricky, and as I spoke earlier about leading the eye to important things, I can use the same tricks in reverse to lead the eye away from the secrets, ensuring that players will really have to hunt for them if they want to find them all. And thus the scene is complete. Well, sort of. The game undergoes frequent playtesting, so it's a good chance that things will change again before the end. Nothing is considered finished in the game until it's actually shipped. But at this point, it's safe to say that the room is about 95% complete or more. So I hope that gives a bit of insight into the art pipeline of the game. To sum it up, it begins as a level design on paper. This is then built as a grey box that's playable from beginning to end. Art is layered on, starting with the basic structure, then the major details, the small details, the lighting, effects, and finally post effects. Throughout the entire process, the game is constantly playtested and the design adjusted and refined as required. Thank you all for coming along, and until next time, everyone.